Peace. Welcome to Faith Expressions. This video presentation is a continuation of the retreat for the men during the Lenten season. The challenges of the men of today in the light of the challenges of Jesus Christ. There were 3 points that were taken out from the videos because the memory didn't suffice. There will be 3 points and then a conclusion. So for the first point, which is already actually the third challenge of Jesus Christ, he was lost and found in the temple. So this is the challenge. Jesus was lost and found in the temple. This is mentioned in the Holy Rosary, the last mystery of the joyful mysteries. So in the scriptures, we read, when he was 12 years old, he went up according to festival custom to Jerusalem with the feast of the Passover. After they had completed its days, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. You may continue the passage. Now, let us consider this passage. And so we can right away ask the question, was it Jesus being lost? Or was it actually the Blessed Mother Mary and Saint Joseph who were lost? First and foremost, we have to realize that Jesus was actually where he was supposed to. Remember this passage. At the end, Jesus would answer to the Blessed Mother Mary and Saint Joseph, am I not supposed to be in my Father's house? Or am I not supposed to be dealing with my Father's business? And they did not understand. And so here, Jesus was lost, seemingly lost, because this is to reveal that it is actually the people, the humanity, who is lost. Jesus is revealing to the people, to humanity, that all of us, when we lose sight of Jesus, we are the ones who are actually lost. Good people can be lost. Mary and Joseph were good people. But good people can be distracted. And that's precisely it. That was what was happening. When they went, when they were already going home, Mary and Joseph was in their caravan. The women will travel, the men will travel, and then the kids can go and accompany any caravan they choose. And kids are kids. And so Mary and Joseph were thinking, okay, maybe it is with another caravan. They get distracted. And so they lost Jesus. Good people can be complacent. And so this is also what happened. Mary could have been thinking Jesus was with Joseph, with the men. And then Joseph also could have been thinking the boy could be with the mother. Complacency. The idea here is not persevering to pay attention to God. Good people, we fall into that trap. And therefore, this being lost by Jesus is a revelation how we people get lost. We get lost because we do not pay attention and focus our direction to God. We are lost because we became complacent. And when we are complacent, many things happen and we don't realize we are already doing not what we are supposed to be doing. Or we are already in a place where we should not be. We get distracted. Why? Because we allow ourselves many times to get distracted. And so, to the men of faith of today, therefore, This is to be engraved into our mind and into our heart. To all of us, we have to put into our mind this responsibility and the idea to know more Jesus, to know more God. You see, in the narrative, Mary treasured all of these things and pondered them in her heart. It is said in the passage. And so, there is Mary trying to know more Jesus. This is a hint also for us to know more Jesus. And therefore, to know more Jesus is a responsibility by faith. It's a responsibility if we truly would like to grow in our spiritual life, in our relationship with God. And so, we have to pay attention and to consider these points. The first one is, Jesus is important. God is important. Losing Jesus will make our life empty and will make everything in life meaningless. Without God, we become meaningless. We become nobody. Even if it may seem everything is all right. Jesus is important. And that is why, realizing that Mary and Joseph were journeying in the caravan without Jesus, they were now worried. They realized that in those 3 days, they don't have Jesus. The same feeling, if we could just imagine and put it into ourselves, if we could just put that feeling and that situation, what Mary and Joseph felt to us, we would know how important Jesus is and how important God is in our life. And that is why it is not about perception, human perception alone. Well, to be good, I feel good. Because this kind of mentality can be deceptive when it will now be related to the truths about God. And so, we might end up having a mentality that is of indifference, moral indifference, moral relativism. Jesus is important. Well, it's up to you. God is important. Well, as long as I am not killing people, I am not doing this, I'm doing that, but I have my own vices, I do this, I do that. This kind of mentality can be very attractive, but this can quench the fire of faith in God. Pay attention. Let us pay attention. Jesus is important. We cannot fall into the mentality of our time, which is attuned to indifference and relativism. Second, pay attention. We pay attention to the principle that we have to grow in our faith. It is our obligation by faith to truly have a relationship with Jesus. And having a relationship with Jesus, meaning we have to know Him more, as we already mentioned. Like the Blessed Mother Mary kept all these things in her heart because she kept pondering them. We too must embark in a deeper relationship, deeper knowledge of Jesus Christ. Men of today, men of faith of today, this is what we have to do. Many times for us men, we just tend to say, well, prayer is just for the women. About faith, about going to church, is just for the women. But the men of today, if we truly are men of faith, we will not be just saying it's about women. No. The responsibility of everyone, a man or a woman. And since this is a retreat for men, then this is now being a confrontation to our own life of faith as men. Know Jesus more. And this is a responsibility by faith. Another point that we have to consider is we should never get distracted. We should never be complacent. We should always have to pay attention to Jesus, because missing Jesus is missing life itself. This is what we have to consider. If we are men of faith, yes, we are good people, and good people get distracted. And when we get distracted from the Lord, it is not that the Lord God is lost. We are lost. This is also the point here. And many times in the course of our journey of life, we get distracted by our career, by our personal quests and personal interests. We get distracted because of the many things that we deal with in our life. And so when we get distracted, we deteriorate in our moral life, we deteriorate in our spiritual life. Why? Because we do not pay attention to build them, to build our spiritual life, to build our moral life. When we get distracted, because we are now prone to go to other way. This is also what we are being reminded of. It is important that we grow in spiritual life. And when we get distracted, our spiritual life is many times compromised. So, a situation or situationer. So, in our time and context, as men of faith, as a situation, especially for the men who have families, who have children, who have grandchildren, single fathers. Think of this. When your child, a son or daughter, is becoming a challenging child, what do you do? How do you deal with your child who is challenged in behavior? And that is why also here, this is a point wherein we are called men of faith of today to transmit the faith well, not only by words, but especially by the manner of our life, the witnessing of the faith to the children. Second, as a situation, men of today, men of faith, we know we were kids before. Remember also those times we hurt so much our parents. Remember the times you rebel and you hurt your mom or your dad, or maybe you were a good kid, but remember the time when you offended God the most. You see, those moments, it is not that God was lost. We were lost. To go back to that experience and tell the Lord, Lord, I am sorry. And lastly is this. I admire the men of today who are persevering in their prayer life. It is admirable for the men of today, in spite of what is happening, in spite of the pull from the lifestyle for the men of today, that they continue to be strong in their faith, that they continue to be rooted in their spiritual life, in their relationship with God. This is admirable. And we continue to have that. So now the fourth challenge of Jesus is the temptation of Jesus in the desert. We know this passage. And so in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 to 11, you see, mentioned there, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. We know the temptation. We know this passage. And so, let us consider what happened here. The dialogue between Satan and Jesus. So, the first temptation, turn this stone to bread. The temptation was to attract, was to confront the bodily needs, the bodily desires, the material tendencies that we have. In this temptation, how did Jesus responded? It is not by bread alone that man lives, but from the word that comes from the mouth of God. The idea here is, it is a revelation to us that the hunger that he is experiencing was to save our hunger for God. And so that humanity who is hungering for God is now encountering God himself, who will feed them by the divine life he has. The word that comes from the mouth of God. This is Jesus himself. The word, the verbo, the word that comes from the mouth of God. Let's pay attention to this. We will go back to this. The second temptation, Jesus was brought to the parapet of the temple. And so the temptation was, throw yourself down. So in this temptation, this is somehow a higher level of temptation. Now, this is a confrontation to the person's self-esteem, the person's ego. So here, person's glorification. You jump and then you will be uploaded by all. All attention will be focused on you. And pay attention to also how Jesus responded. Do not put your God, your Lord, to the test. So here, when we are tempted, we have to know that we have the capacity, because we are children of God, to overcome the evil one. If we are children of God, then we have this dignity that as a child of God, we can overpower, we can be superior over the devil. Because it is in Christ that we can do so. So here is the idea. We are empowered, but this temptation is very attractive, because this is a kind of lifting up our ego, our self-glorification, our self-pride. And remember, to whose glory we should give actually in life. It is only to God. And that is why to God be the glory, not to us. We will go back to that. So the third point here in the narrative is that Satan brought Jesus in a very high mountain and revealed to him all the kingdoms. And then, I will give you all of this if you worship me, if you bow to me. And the response of Jesus, only God should be adored, and only him should you serve. So this is now also for us a revelation that it is only God to whom we have allegiance, we have loyalty, to whom we should serve, to whom we should direct everything of our being. Remember in the commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, with the whole of your being. This is what is being connected here. And to us men of faith, men of today, we are being reminded of this challenge of the Lord Jesus, because you and I also are being challenged. And you and I also pass through many temptations in life. We are being tempted by the lower temptations, bodily temptation, pornography, lust, the craving for money, for pleasure, for anything that give pleasure, give joy to the body. And to all of our earthly desires, and all of our material longings. We might have all of that. But if we do not have God, if we do not have Jesus, we still feel empty. Because when there is no God element in the equation of life, life is still meaningless. And that is why there should be self-discipline. There should be self-discipline. This is the antidote to the first one. Self-discipline. We have to have self-discipline. We have to have detachment of everything that is material, of everything that is temporal and earthly. We may have all of these possessions, but it doesn't mean that the possessions possesses us. We possess them. But the possession doesn't own us. We own them. We have to have detachment. The antidote to the second level of the temptation is, for us, we should avoid the tendency of self-glorification, the tendency of trying to acquire attention to us, trying to put the spotlight always to us. As men of today and men of faith, especially when we are in a group or when we have ministries or you are part of a ministry, many times the tendency is, I did it. Okay, we did it. To tell them we did it. Yeah, it is good to some extent to have somehow, yes, to be thankful, to be given the recognition and the affirmation, but that should not be the purpose of our life always. Because the tendency for self-glorification will be narcissistic, but narcissistic morally and spiritually, and that is not good. Because to God is only the glory, all our honor and glory and attention. If we serve others, very good. The third idea for the third level of the temptation is we have to always have a sense on Jesus crucified. We can empty ourselves. We can empty ourselves of self-worship. We can empty ourselves of that if we are focused on Jesus crucified. Because we will be focusing, Jesus gave himself to me. Then I must give myself to him. And him alone is the one that I will give my focus. If I'm able to do good, then give thanks to the Lord. I give him thanks for giving me the grace that I'm able to do good. You see, if we fall into the third level of the temptation, it is actually because we already have fallen the first temptation and the second temptation. Because the one who will worship the devil, this is power. The one who will worship the devil has forgotten all of other good qualities and all other virtues. You see, power is corruptive. It can corrupt. And the thing here is, the person who has power would like to have more. And the thing here also again is when the person thinks that, oh, he has more power in a way that is, he dominates everything, he is actually emptying himself. Because he himself becomes full of himself. And when he's full of himself, he becomes like Lucifer, who told God, non serviam, I don't serve you anymore. And that is why here, when we focus on Jesus crucified, we empty ourselves. And that is why when we empty ourselves, then we only focus on God. We only focus on Jesus Christ, in loving and serving and being loyal to him. You see, let us try to have all of this and know our temptations are revealing of what kind of qualities we have. Our temptations as well are revealing of what kind of areas in our life that we are weak. Because it is there that the devil attacks us all the more. And that is why, with this example of the challenge of Jesus, we now see what we are supposed to do as men of faith of today? Confront our own lives. See where we are. And see what kind of areas in our life that are weak. And we have to make ways to build them up. What kind of qualities that we lack, we have to try to have them. Virtues. May we not take for granted our building up of ourselves, so that every temptation that comes to us, we will overcome them. Like what Jesus has done. He won all temptations so that we can win our temptations. He won over all temptations in order to empower us that we have power against the evil one. Mark this.